what's going on here, why it does this. No. Oh, that's better. Okay, that's where we are. Okay, we are now live, and I just wanted to mention that this shir today is going to be somewhat short because I want to spend most of the time with the individuals speaking one-on-one, seeing how well you understood the Gemara for this week, right? Especially Yaakov Greenstein, who I want to. I think that he did a lot of work this week. I saw some serious work. I want to see the results, and also you are beginning Rashi, so we want to. We want to see. Huh?
I didn't get time to get to
We're going to see how many Rashis you understood, right? We need to know how many you actually understood. All right. Now, yeah. So, yeah, that's what we're going to be dealing with today very shortly. Okay. Yesterday we pretty much fought with you guys to actually pay attention and understand the Gemara. It was a big battle, and I'm hoping by now you actually understand the Gemara. There is a last part of this week's quota that we did not cover, which I will cover today, Bezrat Hashem, so just to feel that you got through the Gemara. And once you get through this last part of the Gemara, I would suggest that until you get asked to sit down with me and learn together with me one-on-one, you should try to go it over as best as possible to understand it, to delve into it, and to understand what's going on. Okay? Now, we basically concluded yesterday with a kasha, with a question against who? Who is a question against that we seem to disprove a particular opinion. Which opinion was that? Yaakov Greenstein. Yeah, we seemingly disproved one opinion of the Amoraic degree.
We ended up concluding with which we
Huh? We're Daf Lamed Ches Amud Aleph, 38a. Okay? We ended up with a question against. Who was the question against, or the challenge that we challenged and we failed to resolve the challenge? In other words, we remain with a challenge. We ended Kashya. It is in fact a question resulting in the... Very good. Thank you, Yaakov Greenstein. We have... yeah, very good. We have a up-and-coming Talmudic star. All right? So we ended up a question with Rabbi and Rabbi Yosef, and that's that. Now, once the Gemara ends with the question, we then go on to a completely new thing, a completely new concept, okay? And that's what we're going to go on today. Oh, good. And then we actually explained to you what this Gezerah was. There was a Gezerah that people started leaving things by accident and saying they did it. They left it on purpose and said that they did it by accident. They did it purposely by accident, and therefore the Gezerah was made to basically cancel it all out. All right, that was that. We ended Kasha. Zil. And then we're going to go on to a new question, which is Kasha de Rabbi Meir ad Rabbi Meir. There is a contradiction between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Meir. Kasha de Rabbi Yehuda ad Rabbi Yehuda. There is a contradiction of Rabbi Yehuda on Rabbi Yehuda. And guess what? The Gemara is expecting that you're in your brilliance. The Gemara is expecting that you already realize that on last page, we also had an opinion of Rabbi Meir, and we also had an opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. And you should have realized that if you read this Tanaic quote, that this Tanaic quote is in fact contradicting that Tanaic quote in some way, right? Okay, because Rabbi Meir basically says that Beis Shammai doesn't let you leave any water. Beis Shammai doesn't let you leave anything on Akira, even if it's Grufa Ketuma. And over here he seems to say, well, if you left it on a Grufa Ketuma, as long as it's fully cooked, if it's not mitztamik, even if it is mitztamik v'toivloi, it's going to be allowed. So hold on a second. It seems like he's allowing you to put food from Friday to Shabbos, right? Contrary to what he says in his original statement that even Beis Hillel prohibited you from leaving food from Friday to Shabbos. So that is a contradiction. Now, I see eyes. When I see people just staring at me, it's basically like saying, yeah, Rabbi, I'm pretending like I know what you're talking about, but...
I would like to know what you're talking about. I'm for some reason when I hear understanding the mark, I can only understand the beginning part.
So, as I said already yesterday, sometimes, especially when you're getting used to learning Gemara, you have to read it over and over again because the Gemara is actually a train of thought that does not exist in the Western world, at least from a secular perspective. And in order to get used to this train of thought, you must kind of bop it into your brains. Okay, and in order to bop this into your brains, sometimes you have to read it over and over. Not necessarily are you going to succeed by just listening to a rabbi talk. All right? Good. As I told people in the past, I know somebody that I told him that in our yeshiva we have a program that could teach you how to learn Gemara in 6 to 8 months. He told me, "What are you talking about, Rabbi? I'm learning Gemara for 30 years and I still can't learn it on my own." And this person was going to shiurim, listening to rabbis. So again, listening to a rabbi talk, including me, as interesting as I might be, you will not develop into a Talmudic scholar. The only way to develop into a Talmudic scholar is for you to read it yourself, understand it yourself, and my teachings are only there kind of the cherry on the top, the queen on my cake, to kind of like smooth out some of the maybe bumpy edges that you might experience when you're learning. Okay? Huh? You should what? Again, what I want everybody in this year to do is they should be reading the Gemara on their own, trying their best to understand it in the words of the Gemara, and then coming to my shir to kind of fill in little blanks. Or if you had a bumpy road, you should be coming to me with an expectation of, well, how does this make sense? I read this in the Gemara. It doesn't make sense. If you're looking at me to give you to initiate the information, you're not going to have a good time. Right? If you're looking at me as like, oh, the rabbi's giving me all the information, I am giving you all the information, but you're not understanding it because your brain is simply disabled by Western stupidology. Yeah. Again, I cannot answer that question. You're going to have to answer that question for yourself. But if you're only coming to the shir, if this is your only time learning Gemara, then you should not be in the shir. You should only be in the shir if this shir is helping you with you learning the Gemara after the shir. That's why we have a shir for 15, 20 minutes, half an hour, 45 minutes. That should be like really the max shir. And then you go review, study what we learned in the shir. You should be learning in the Gemara. Anyways, what I'm telling you over here is the contradiction between the contradiction between Rabbi Meir on himself, as well as the contradiction of Rabbi Yehuda on himself, is based on the quote on the last page on Lamed Zion Amud Aleph 37a. There is a quote from a Tanaic quote that quotes Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir. I'm actually not even going to bother telling you the details. You must read that quote and read the quote on our page. You will see that there's a contradiction between Rabbi Meir and there's a contradiction of Rabbi Yehuda. What that contradiction is, it's up to you. You are the one that must go through it. You have to actually understand what that contradiction is. I'm not even going to tell you what the contradiction is. But there is a contradiction between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Meir. There's a contradiction between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yehuda. In other words, they seem to be contradicting themselves by saying conflicting rules in two different quotes, right? From the quote over there to the quote over here. Yeah? Good. Now the Gemara tries to resolve this contradiction. It's going to try to deal with this contradiction. How does it try to deal with this contradiction? It's going to try to show how it's not really a contradiction, right? So it starts out, the Rabbi Meir ad Rabbi Meir. The contradiction of Rabbi Meir contradicting himself, loy kashya, is really not a question. Ha lechatchila hadi'evet. One is referring to lechatchila and one's b'di'evet. Meaning lechatchila, Rabbi Meir says you're not allowed to put food from Friday to Shabbos. And in our quote, in our place, he's talking about what if you did it. There could be a tremendously different rule between what you're allowed to do and what if you already did it. This is a tremendous concept throughout Jewish literature. We have the rule of lichatchila. You know what lichatchila is? What's lichatchila?
Before the
Lichatchila is what you should do. That's lichatchila, what you should do. B'di'evet is what was already done. Okay? If I ask, should I punch the guy in the face? You say, no, I shouldn't punch the guy in the face. And what if I already punched him in the face? Then you should say sorry. Does that mean you should punch the guy in the face and then say sorry? No, you shouldn't punch the guy in the face. But if you already did it, then you say sorry. You understand? This guy's laughing. He's like, yeah, like he's visions. The second I say punch, like his whole mind is like, punch him.
I was like, we're punching.
Don't punch somebody in the face. Okay? But once you punch somebody in the face, you say sorry. Now, the same thing is in halacha. The same thing is in halacha. In halacha, very often we have very clear times where it says, do not do this. But if you did it, this is the rule. Why? Because there's a before the fact and there's after the fact. And so our Gemara says that the previous quote of Rabbi Meir was talking about before the fact, and before the fact, you shouldn't really do anything. You should not leave food on the fire. However, after the fact, he holds that, well, if you after the fact and it's fully cooked, he's going to let you have it.
I'm going to this right now. So
Yeah.
the mayor holds that even in an oven that's group fed, you cannot leave anything top, even if it's raw.
Why don't you go back to the last page and actually read it?
I did. That's what I saw. It just didn't make sense.
First of all, he's not talking about an oven. Don't use the term oven. Kira is not an oven. And the reason I keep on telling you because there is a concept of a tanner that we're going to discuss in the future, and that could confuse you.
Right.
Okay, so let's get this straight. Rabbi Meir basically says that Beis Shammai doesn't allow you to leave anything on a kira, even if it is grufa ketuma.
Yeah.
Beis Hillel, if it is grufa ketuma, will only allow hot water and not food. That's what Rabbi Meir holds. That's what Rabbi Meir holds. But over here, he's saying if it's fully cooked and it's not mitzvamic, and even if it is mitzvamic v'yafalei, he said that if you left it, you could eat the food, right? So again, it could be that Rabbi Meir is stricter on lechatchila and more lenient on b'di'evet. That could be. That's not an issue at all. However, let's look at Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda nami loy kasha. The question Rabbi Yehuda is also not a question. Kan be gerufa ketuma. Over here, we're talking about if you did the gerufa ketuma. Kan be she'eni gerufa ketuma, and one is without gerufa ketuma, right? Which means over there, we're talking about if you do gerufa ketuma, you could leave food on the fire no matter what. Over here, not necessarily. Not necessarily you're allowed to leave food on the fire. Sorry. Over here, we're talking about what's if you left the food on the fire without it being grufa geduma. What are you allowed to? What's the story? All right. Good. Weiter gegangen. Now the Gemara is going to go and ask a very interesting question. Okay, it's going to say Iboyilahu. We have a question. Remember, this is an important keyword that we had multiple times in this class. What does Iboyilahu mean as a keyword? Yosef Forrester. What does it mean?
The Talmudic discussion continues.
No. What is Iboyilahu? They raise a question. They raise a question that is meant to be a question that is unique and something that we need to figure out, something that we don't know. It's not a proof or a contradiction to anybody. It is simply it's not a continuation. It's specifically not. Iboyilahu is usually kind of a new discussion.
Oh, wow.
Right? A Bailahu is usually a new discussion where, again, it might be based on the previous discussion.
Right.
We said something previously, and that actually triggered our question that we didn't know, what should we do?
Who raised the question?
Huh?
Who raised the question?
If it says Ibaylahu, someone raised the question.
Is it they or he?
Ibaylahu is they asked the question. Yeah.
Oh.
You know, they are very famous, and they were actually around even in the time of the Gemara.
Wow.
Yeah. They are like this immortal being that they say a lot of things.
Must be very interesting
Right.
to know how they actually compiled it.
I would actually I would be very interested in meeting them.
Yeah.
Yeah. I hear a lot about them.
Ravashi and Ravina.
I hear a lot about them. They, you know. But it's interesting that you know, all jokes aside, it's interesting to see that there's actually a precedence in the Talmud where they actually use the term they for somebody with decent brains worthy of entertaining their idea, said as follows, or asked as follows.
Maybe they were
Right.
too humble.
Huh?
Maybe they were too humble to disclose who they were. Maybe they were too humble to disclose who they were.
Not necessarily. It's probably when it was recorded at the time of the Gemara, they didn't know who it was. Huh?
Babylon.
They were somewhere in the Babylonian area. That's what they call the Babylonian Talmud for a reason. Could be. No, they had a place, base medrash. They had a base medrash. Yeah. How does a non-binary ninja? So first of all, non-binary doesn't exist, and neither do ninjas.
Boo!
Hmm? How does what work?
Non-binary.
Anyways, making fun of. Why are you making fun of these? You know.
Stop making fun of retard, bro.
You know, would you go over to a person who's literally mentally challenged and start like poking jokes at him and what they say and how they say it?
Speak for yourself, bro.
Anyways, let's continue. Iboilahu normally is a new discussion, a new inquiry, and as you're going to see, this actually is a very important piece of the new inquiry. Iboilahu, the Gemara asks the following question: Over Vishaha, if you transgressed and you left it on the fire, my. What is the rule? Mikansu, Rabbanan, did the rabbis fine him? Eloi or not? Now, who could tell me what on earth is the massive issue with this Iboilahu? Huh? What is the difference between this Iboilahu and the previous Bo Meneim Rabbi Chia?
Avar is transgressed.
Huh?
Avar is transgressed, right?
Correct. So how is this different than the previous conversation? How is this question that we just had, how is this unique to the previous conversation? Iboilahu, we asked the question, Avar v'shaha, if you transgressed and left it on the fire. Yeah. Yeah. What is that?
Yes.
So what's the difference between this and the previous discussion in the Gemara?
The previous discussion.
Exactly. That's not an answer to the question. The
rabbis did penalize them before. Before the Iboilahu.
So then why are we asking the Iboilahu? When the Gemara asks the Iboilahu, there's some pieces that we're missing that we don't know. Yeah.
No, it does say that the rabbis did penalize them. So why is asking again? It does say that the rabbis did.
So why is it asking the same question again?
Exactly.
Why would we ask the same question one after the next?
Waste of time.
Huh? Me?
Me is who?
Oh, me is who? And who is he? And he is she.
And they are all one.
That's true, by the way. In Hebrew, who is he? He is she.
What's up second?
No. Who is he? He is she. There's another one. Oh, me is who? That's right. Me is who? Who is he? He is she. Yeah. If you want to learn Hebrew, me is who and who is he and he is she. So. What's on second? What? I'm not seeing why the Gemara is asking a question that seemed to be resolved just a second ago. Wait a minute, didn't we already? Isn't that what we just did? Why are we reading this back up? I just told you Iboilu was a keyword, and the keyword basically is saying, the keyword is saying that we're asking a new inquiry because there's a piece of information that we don't know. How come all of a sudden it's giving us information that we already know? That doesn't make any sense. That's not what Iboilu usually is. Right? So I'll just point out to you a small difference between the last question and this question. The last question actually was shochach, he forgot, which seemingly indicates accidental situation. And in our Gemara, we have the word ovar. Ovar is he transgressed, which sounds like he's doing it deliberately. Now, there is a difference, obviously, if you did it by accident or deliberately in concept, but we've just resolved that it's the same exact rule. So we already resolved it a second ago that if you transgress, it's the same rule as if you don't transgress. Meaning if you did it by accident or if you did it on purpose, it's the same rule. So even though the question is in fact a little different, because one's talking about by accident, one's talking about on purpose, but the fact that we already resolved this, how do we resolve this? What if we did it on purpose?
Then you're chayav misach.
No.
You break Shabbos.
If you leave from Friday to Shabbos, you did not break Shabbos. No. What did you break? What happens if a person leaves? What did a person do if they left food from Friday to Shabbos in an instant where they were not?
And they must be lashed.
Do they get killed for violating the rabbinic decree? So, very good. So we resolved prior in the previous Gemara, we resolved that whether a person did it by accident or they did it on purpose, they would be prohibited from eating the food on Shabbos. Right? So even though our question is different than the last question, but the fact that we resolved it should preempt the fact that we shouldn't be asking the question, because we only should be asking the question if we didn't resolve it. But if we already resolved it, then why are you asking the question? Yeah, there is a problem. This concept is discussed in Tosfos. Yeah, not so much in Rashi. So I know you guys are. This class is a pre-Tosfos class, but I threw at you a Tosfos question without giving you the answer. So that's that. Try to figure it out. See if you could. Right? So we have Toshma, the Amar Shmuel Bar Nosson, Amar Rabbi Chanina, Kishalach Rabbi Yossi L'Tzipoiri. When Rabbi Yossi went to Tzipoiri, Matza Chamin, he found hot water. Shenishtahu al Gabi Kira, that was left on Akira, V'loi Asu Lahem. He did not prohibit it. Beitzim Mitzumokos, he found basically cooked, shriveled up eggs. Shenishtahu al Gabi Kira, that was left on Akira, V'asu Lahem, and there he actually prohibited it. My love lo'isi Shabbos. Doesn't it mean that he prohibited it? He prohibited them from eating it from that Shabbos. The Gemara answers loy the Shabbos abba. It's not talking about that Shabbos. He basically told them, do not do this again, and that's that. Miklal the beitzim. Now we say, if that's the case, the beitzim mitzukmakis mitzamikis v'yaveh. Are you telling me that shriveled up eggs get better as they cook?
Yeah.
The Gemara says, ain. Absolutely. Absolutely. The Amar Rav Chama Bar Chanina. That's because Rabbi Chama Bar Chanina says, Pam achas. There was one time, Nis arachti ani. I was a guest together with the Rebbe, the Mokim Echad in a particular place. Veheviu lefonenu beitzim mitzumokes, and they brought us shriveled up eggs cooked for a really long time. Ki izrodin v'ochalm min harbe, and we ate a lot of them. Apparently, shriveled up, cooked, super cooked, overcooked eggs actually taste good. And Shmuel is looking at me like, you know why? because you have the Western poison in your brain that you always try to figure things out in your own imagination, and then you decide that that's true. You ever tried tasting this? Maybe if it tasted, it would taste good.
I had scrambled eggs that were too long, and then they got like.
Yeah, but they were not like cooked in something like
Yeah.
like shakshuka.
Yeah.
Shakshuka, you have eggs that are kind of cooked in.
Like eggs burnt up.
Huh? What about the eggs? What about the eggs in the chont? You ever have the eggs in the chont?
Oh,
You have the egg turned,
yeah.
turn nice and brown and
Brown.
hard and
Aminado.
thick, and you're like,
What do you call it?
huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They cook in the juicer. So that kind of, I mean, obviously it makes sense. It's an Amara, where I'm not going to question the Amara. But
Put it this way: you have to figure out the recipe. Go to the gravesite of Rabbi Bar Chama Bar Chanina
ask him how to make that.
and ask him. Listen, I want to see what these shriveled up eggs taste like. Could you please send me a recipe?
Yeah, well, also a lot of this stuff, to be fair, though, a lot of stuff they say sounds absolutely disgusting.
Again, what do you mean sounds? You have to taste it. I don't know if it tastes disgusting.
I mean, dates mixed with lamb, mixed with beef, stuff itself.
Let me tell you something. In the West, they're so into appearance that people, you don't realize. Sometimes you go to a restaurant and you pay like $300 for the meal. Really, the meal cost about $10, and you're paying about $290 for them to make it look nice.
There's something about appearance.
Yeah.
Oh, we said over here, we're talking about guests. What do you mean the Western culture? Something Gemara right here. We're stomach be up for like this for guests. If it's not for guests, it's not like. Yeah. Yeah. It depends if it's for guests or not.
Right.
Presentation's a big thing in the Gemara.
No, but presentation's a big thing because for guests. But for yourself, if you want to eat something, adrabah, you would rather, as you see, if it tastes, huh?
What was it called? Shriveled eggs?
Something like that, yeah.
What was the word Gemara
They
used?
cooked it for a long time. It was an eggs that they cooked for a really, really long time.
Eggs for a
A
long
really, really long time.
No, presentation is important. Like in third grade, there's something around this sauce, but this,
Maybe ask if there's a recipe. Ask Mrs. or Mr. AI and say if is there any recipe for super long cooked eggs? Huh? All right, we got to the end of this week's quota. What? That's actually a good question. Should we do a shear? We should do a shear. All right. I really wanted to test these guys, and I have to leave at about 1:15, so it's going to be tough. How about this? We're going to end right now. And
brings up is egg cooked in John.
yeah, really?
Kind of.
Whatever it is, it got better.
Which AI are you using?
Whatever it is, it got better. It tasted better.
Good.
Do you know what part of the Gemara I'm referring to then?
Huh?
It got better.
Okay, we're gonna end over there, and we'll see. I'm gonna start calling guys over for a little bit, and then but maybe about 12:30, I have to share with the other class. Thanks for joining. Please come again. If you haven't joined our WhatsApp group, you could join it by clicking the QR code that I just put on the screen. Yeah, put that QR code, and once you do that QR code, you can join us in our WhatsApp group. That you do get some updates, not all. See you soon.